Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Yevamot, Samach Bet through Samach Het, 62 through 68. Samach Bet. Shlosha dvarim asa Moshe mida'ato, v'skima da'ato l'da'at makom. There were three things that Moshe did of his own accord, that he was not told to do, and yet when the end result happened, it turns out that he agreed with God. In other words, that God was satisfied with Moshe's independent actions. What are the three examples? Pereish min ha'isha, that he was never told that he had to permanently separate from his wife. That when he became a Navi and a leader of the people who communicated regularly with God, he determined that it would be improper for him to have normal marital relations with a spouse. And so, although Bnei Yisrael returned to their wives after Ma'amad Har Sinai, Moshe remained separate from his wife. Secondly, Shiber Teluchot. No one ever told Moshe to break the first tablets. After the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, Moshe took it upon himself to smash the tablets at the base of the mountain. Thirdly, Hosif Yom Echad, that the preparation for the revelation at Sinai was supposed to be Shloshet Yamim, 3 days, as per divine command. But according to one man Amar, one opinion in the Talmud, Moshe added a fourth day, postponing the revelation by a day. And it's unclear whether that meant that the revelation occurred on the 6th of Sivan or the 7th of Sivan. Samach Gimel, 63. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Kol Adam she'en lo isha eino Adam. If a man does not have a wife, he's hardly a man at all. Shene'emar, as it says, Achar nekeva bara'am, that God created the male and female, like Krat Shemam Adam, and then called them Adam, or man. In other words, if you're just Zachar, and you don't also have nekeva with you, you're insufficiently an Adam. This is just one of the ways the sages homiletically made it their point to discourage bachelorhood. You don't want a person to be single forever. Then, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Klodam she'en lo karka eino Adam. Anyone who doesn't have real estate, who doesn't own real property, land, is not a person. Shene'emar, Aretz natan livnei Adam. The Aretz was given to Bnei Adam, so if you want to be an Adam, you have to have real estate. The point here is twofold. One, in antiquity, it was often the case in certain civilizations that you did not have political rights. You were not enfranchised unless you were a landowner. And so you were essentially in the underclass, the unrepresented underclass, if you lacked karka. Also, you could feed yourself if you have karka. If you own land from which you could grow crops, and even in times of material want, when everybody else is struggling and the people in the cities have nothing to eat and are starving, you can live off your own land. So it's a fallback measure of basic human survival. Samach Dalad. Nasa isha v'shayma 10 shanim v'lo yalada and rasha libatel. If a man was married to the same woman for 10 years, and she never bore a child for him, then he has an obligation to move on in life because he has a responsibility of pru revu milu ta'aretz, be fruitful and multiply. And if this woman cannot provide him with a child, then he must turn elsewhere. Now, in the days when polygamy was allowed, this could mean maintaining that first wife and adding another wife to his household. However, in the absence of polygamy, if we're only going to allow for monogamy, then he would have to divorce her and find another wife with whom to have children. Then, Gersha Muteras Linase. If she was divorced from the woman's perspective, after 10 years of not bearing a child, she could marry another man. And the second husband can also wait out 10 years, hoping that she will give him a child, just like the first one did. Then, Samachay. Ha'ish mitzuveh al priya. Males are commanded to be fruitful and multiply. They have an obligation to bear children. One halacha is one son and one daughter. However, a woman has no obligation to bear children. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Omer, al shneim hu omer pru revu. No, Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka says both men and women are equally obligated in the mitzvah of pru revu, be fruitful, multiply. It's not skewed towards men only. Now, within the viewpoint that it's skewed towards men only, why should that be the case? Now, obviously, a man can't have children without a willing partner, so he has to find a willing woman who wants to bear children for him, but she has no religious obligation, he does. But why should that be the case? So one of the explanations that doesn't appear in the daf here, but is given by some of the commentators, is Dirachea darchei noam, v'chon tivotei shalom, that all of God's ways are ways of pleasantness. And since bearing a child, physically giving birth, is very painful, there was no way that God could command a woman to do so. It's meritorious for it to happen and for her to facilitate that birth, but she could not be directly commanded to engage in that kind of behavior. Samech Vav. Bat Yisrael shniset lekohen. If a regular Jewish girl was married to a kohen, vichnisa lo avadim, and she brought into the marriage servant population, non-Jewish servant population, bein avdei melug, bein avdei tzon barzel, regardless of whether they are the variety known as avdei melug or the variety known as avdei tzon barzel. They're allowed to eat truma either way. Now, in the case of the tzon barzel, that really belongs to the husband. And if he's a Kohen, I understand why the servant population of the Kohen is allowed to eat truma. But in the case of malog, where really it belongs to the woman, why should it be permitted for them to eat? And the answer is because since the woman enters into the Kohanic household as a kinyan of the husband, so too whatever she possesses also falls into the same category and can eat truma. Samech Zayin, 67. Ha'ubar posel v'lo machil. A fetus in the womb of the wife of a Kohen will invalidate her from eating truma and not allow her to eat truma. Now we're talking about a situation where the husband died. So Ibat Kohen Yisrael, if she was the daughter of a Kohen and she married a regular Yisrael, Pasila, so she cannot eat truma because even though when her husband dies, ordinarily she would go back to her father's house, and a Kohanic girl who goes back to her father's house after being widowed or divorced can't eat truma. In this instance, she goes back pregnant with a fetus, and that negates her ability to go back to her father's house and eat truma. And if she was a regular Jewish girl who went married to Kohen, then if she were to have a child from that Kohen, then she could forever eat truma even after the husband dies. And maybe this fetus will turn out to be a viable child, and she will eat truma at a later time. But at the moment she can't, because a fetus alone, not a born child, is insufficient to allow her to eat truma. Samachet. We have a kal vachomer here. Magrusha shmuteres betruma. If a woman who was divorced, who was the daughter of a Kohen, and goes back to her father's house, having not had any children, she's allowed to eat truma, asur lakuna, but she cannot marry a Kohen because she's a divorced woman. Zusha asur betruma, then a woman who had forbidden relations and is now disqualified from eating truma, and then shapas lakuna, all the more so she can't go ahead and marry a Kohen subsequently. But do we declare that something could be forbidden and punishable on the basis of a kal vachomer, of a logical inference alone? The Gemara responds, it's not really a logical inference at all. It's just a revelation of the nature of the law. Everyone have a great week.